You know, I'm not even gonna lie when I say that making this video kind of hurts me to do because I love Pixar. I mean, everyone loves Pixar, but the thing is, it just feels wrong for me to criticize them and talk negatively about them. I could do that with Disney as much as I want and it never gets old. It's the most fun thing you could do. Basically, every other branch of Disney, I have no problem, being negative about, alright? Disney doesn't care about animation. If they did care about animation, they wouldn't be making a live-action remake of a movie that isn't even a fucking decade old yet. The MCU I really like, but honestly, I wouldn't say I love it or I have, any, emotional, personal connection to the movies. So me dropping the MCU isn't really a tough choice to make. I don't care about Star Wars and I don't ever want to get into it because I know how the fans of it can be. So basically every other part of Disney I have no problem criticizing and being negative about. Pixar feels sacred though. Pixar feels like they are exempt from any hate and criticism. It just feels blasphemous to talk bad about Pixar, But because of their recent outings, I have no other choice but to be, I have to criticize how they are nowadays, and I have to look at why they're not as good as they used to be. So in today's video, I'm going to be looking at why Pixar is not as good as it used to be. It's not that they're awful, it's just that they're nowhere near as good as they used to be. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing as well, as it would be greatly appreciated. With that said, let us jump right into the video. So the first thing that I would like to discuss is the lack of original ideas that Pixar has been having lately compared to back in their golden age. Now for reference, Pixar's golden age I consider to be their first 11 movies, from Toy Story to Toy Story 3, 1995 to 2010. I know it's cliche to call Cars 2 the first bad Pixar movie or the worst Pixar movie and whatnot, and I have seen people be more positive to it. I've seen people say it's not as bad as we make it out to be. I can't say for sure because I haven't watched it in forever and I don't think I'll ever rewatch it, but regardless, Pixar changed after Cars 2. That is an undeniable fact. Before Cars 2, Pixar was pumping out mostly original movies with original storylines. After Cars 2, Pixar starts putting out more and more sequels with less original ideas than before. Just to give you an idea, Pixar released 7 movies in the 2000s and all of them are original. Not a single one of these 7 movies is a sequel. None of them are sequels. They're all original movies. In the 2010s, Pixar released 11 movies, and of these 11 movies, only 4 of them are original. Brave, Inside Out, The Good Dinosaur, and Coco, and that's it. Those are the only original movies that Pixar released in the 2010s. Everything else was a sequel, or a prequel in Monsters University's case. Granted, they have been slowing down after Toy Story 4. I believe they said somewhere that after Toy Story 4, they were going to start focusing more on original ideas and stop making sequels and whatnot, which is a good thing. Post Toy Story 4, they went a solid 4 movies that were completely original before potentially breaking that streak with Lightyear, which is meant to be a spin-off of Toy Story. I'm not entirely sure if it counts or not. I don't know. You could say it continues the streak or it doesn't because it almost has nothing to do with the Toy Story movies. I don't know, it's debatable. Regardless though, they have been focusing considerably on original movies, but they are still doing sequels. The only sequels that they have planned, to my knowledge, are Inside Out 2, which, I mean, sure, that could work, I guess, and Toy Story 5, which, no, nobody asked for this to be made. Toy Story 4 shouldn't have been made in the first place because it completely ruined the emotional impact of the third movie's ending. There is no way for Toy Story 5 to work unless they retcon Toy Story 4 and have Woody be back with the rest of the gang. That's the only possible way it could work. And even then, even if it retcons Toy Story 4, it still ruins the ending of Toy Story 3, so yeah. It's understandable that, sometimes they could just make sequels to their previous movies and they don't always have to keep making original ideas. That's fine. Sometimes we want to see these characters come back again. We want to see them return. But they relied on it way too much in the 2010s. Again, 11 movies in the 2010s, only 4 of them are original. Think about that. As if that wasn't enough, most of these recent post-Cars 2 Pixar movies, it's not that they're bad. Again, this isn't me saying that like Pixar is bad nowadays or anything like that, but the thing is, they're just not as good as they once were during their golden age. Movies like Monsters University and Finding Dory are good, but that's the thing. They're just good, and that's it. They're not amazing. They're not masterpieces like the original Monsters Inc. or Finding Nemo. They are far from bad movies, but they're nothing to write home about either. Inside Out, Coco, and Soul are the only amazing movies that Pixar has released post Cars 2. These aren't the only good movies, it's just that they're the only ones that I'd say are on par with their golden age material. And again, these aren't bad movies for the most part. I mean, yeah, maybe Cars 2 is bad, I don't know. Good Dinosaur is the most unremarkable thing ever, and I'm not a very huge fan of the two 2022 movies they put out. But Pixar, you know, post Cars 2 is not necessarily bad, it's just average, you know? Pixar back in the 2000s was completely different. They were unique. Nobody else was like Pixar. And then nowadays, it feels like just Pixar's just another animation studio. The special, unique magic that they once had, it's not there anymore. Only Pixar could have made The Incredibles, while Lightyear, anyone could have made. Sony could have made it, DreamWorks could have made it, Illumination could have made it. Yeah, think about that. A Pixar movie should not feel like an Illumination movie. It should feel like a Pixar movie. I'll go into more detail about that in a little bit. It really hurts me when it's like they finally release a movie that I've been looking forward to, and then it just ends up being not bad, but just really like whatever. It's okay, you know, it's fine. Incredibles 2 turns 5 this year, which, Jesus, Incredibles 2 turns half a decade old this year. I feel really old right now. And it is not a bad movie at all, not by any means, but considering how long we had to wait for this movie, yeah, I'm sorry, it's kind of underwhelming. We waited almost 15 years for this movie, and what we end up getting is a rehash of the original, except Helen is the main character instead of Bob. Oh yeah, and you also have Saul Goodman and Roxanne from Megamind added into the mix as well, the latter of which is probably the worst villain in Pixar history. Seriously, Screenslaver was a cool idea for a villain, and they just wasted it. The one Pixar movie that I hoped wouldn't have that twist villain nonsense, and it ends up having it. Just absolutely wonderful. The just good quality of most recent Pixar movies just feels really off, especially when you take into consideration all of the non-Disney and Pixar animated movies that we have been getting in the wake of Spider-Verse. Like, why isn't Pixar joining in on this trend? It would be absolutely perfect. Honestly, it makes sense that Disney wouldn't want to jump in on this trend. It makes sense, you know? It feels weirdly in character for them to not want to jump in on the newest trend of animated movies. I mean, yeah, they're kind of doing it with Wish, but that's about it. For all we know, it'll probably just be a one-time thing and that's it. But honestly, it feels weirdly in character for Disney to not follow this trend of artistic animated movies that Spider-Verse pioneered. For Pixar to not follow it makes no sense at all. You would think the people that gave us the first CGI animated movie ever would be jumping in on this trend. You would think the people that gave us movies like Ratatouille and WALL-E would be jumping in on this trend, but nope. Safe, perfectly fine movies with nothing notable about them at all. It doesn't make any sense at all. Imagine if Pixar made an Incredibles 3 that had the style of Spider-Verse and Puss in Boots 2. Would you not want to see that? Tell me that doesn't sound f***ing awesome. I dare you. Tell me you wouldn't want to see that. I want Pixar to focus more on original movies, and I want them to slow down with the sequels, but I think we could all make an exception for Incredibles 3 if it were to follow the Spider-Verse Puss in Boots style, you know? Seeing Pixar get absolutely destroyed by the competition in 2022 is just really baffling to see, and I don't think it will ever not be. And I have a feeling it's going to repeat this year as well, because I'm sure Elemental will be a good movie, but it will not stand a chance against Across the Spider-Verse. I'm sorry. I'm not a huge fan of either of these movies, and I consider them to be pretty low points for Pixar. They're not bad on their own, but for Pixar standards, these are some of their weakest movies. Lightyear is just this really dull and average movie. Like, there's nothing special about it, there's nothing remarkable about it, it's a nothing movie. Like, yeah, it's not necessarily bad, it's watchable, but like, there is nothing special about it. I was one of the 5 people in existence that watched this movie when it came out in theaters, and when I saw it, I thought, yeah, this is a pretty good movie. And then like 2 days later, I'm like, wait, what happens in this movie again? I forgot. I find it both really funny and really sad that the only reason anyone cared about this movie was because a bunch of people got their panties in a twist over a blink and you'll miss it 2-second lesbian kiss scene. This is the only reason anyone cared about this movie at all. If this scene never got any of the backlash that it got, nobody would have cared about this movie. This movie would have been even more of a box office flop than it already was. I'm not saying that I agree, you know, obviously it's, you know, it's really stupid to get mad over a 2-second kiss scene that has no effect on the plot, but the fact that the controversy surrounding this scene was the only reason anyone cared about this movie in the first place, I find to be both really funny and really sad. And the ironic thing as well is that this 2-second kiss scene is the only memorable scene in the entire movie. And it's just because of the controversy that surrounded it. That is really f***ing sad for Pixar standards. I mean, to be fair, to give this movie a little bit of credit, at least it doesn't ruin like the original 3 Toy Story movies like Toy Story 4 does. If you had this movie alongside the original 3 Toy Story movies, it will obviously be a much inferior movie when it comes to the quality, but at least it wouldn't like ruin anything. The original trilogy wouldn't be ruined if you put Lightyear next to it compared to with Toy Story 4, so you know, that's a plus, I guess. But that's not really like a huge compliment for the movie, honestly. That's just a very faint praise. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If Lightyear wasn't based on a well-established, like beloved, famous cartoon character and was instead just a generic, original astronaut space ranger character, this movie could easily pass off as an Illumination film. There is nothing in this movie that makes it feel like a Pixar movie except that Buzz Lightyear is the main character. That unique Pixar quality that earlier Pixar films had, yeah, it's not here in Lightyear. This movie is literally no different from your average Illumination film in terms of how safe and generic it is. There is nothing interesting or worthwhile about this movie. It is the most average 5 out of 10 3 stars movie you will ever watch in your life. I also find it to be wasted potential. Like, a spin-off movie about Buzz Lightyear would have been like cool. The idea behind this movie that like this is meant to be the movie that inspires Andy to get a Buzz Lightyear toy for his birthday, you know, that's not a bad idea actually, but the execution is just not there at all. And this is meant to be a movie from 1995. It doesn't feel like one at all. I would envision an Outer Space Kids movie from 1995 to be really cheesy, you know, have like this kind of low budget charm to it, just something really stupid and goofy. This movie takes itself so seriously. There's no like color at all. The color scheme is very dull looking and bland, and it just takes itself really seriously. There's no like goofy cheesiness like I would expect from an Outer Space Kids movie from 1995. There's literally nothing like that at all. I honestly just find this to be a very weak movie. I know that's not an unpopular opinion, but yeah, this movie is not that good. It's not bad at all, that's the thing. It's just a nothing movie. There is nothing to say about this movie. I cannot decide if I think Turning Red is the better movie or Lightyear is the better movie, because although Lightyear is the movie that I'd be more inclined to rewatch a second time compared to Turning Red, I find Turning Red to be a much cringier, harder to sit through film compared to Lightyear. But at the same time, at least Turning Red does some interesting things in it. At least it has like a few unique ideas, you know, it's not afraid to take risks. But I honestly find this movie to be kind of obnoxious and cringy. Like, people tell me like that's the point, it's meant to be cringy, it's meant to be, you know, it's meant to be relatable for like, you know, a teenage girl growing up in the early 2000s. I get that. You could say that this movie is not for me, but still, you know, I feel like it's a little too on the nose. It's just uncomfortable for me to watch. I just generally don't like this movie that much. It's not a bad movie on its own, but yeah, this is kind of one of the worst films for Pixar standards. I'll give it credit for having a more like original idea behind it compared to Lightyear. I'll give it credit for like taking more risks when compared to Lightyear, but I find it to be a much more obnoxious film, and just I would never sit down and watch this film again. Oh yeah, let's not forget the most important problem that this movie has. Turning Red, despite being set in 2002, does not once reference a crucial event that occurred in the early 2000s. I am of course talking about the rise in popularity of both nu metal and pop punk. Now, as someone that was born in the early 2000s, I am heavily offended at this inaccuracy. Nobody cared about boy bands in 2002. In 2002, it was all about that Limp Bizkit, yo, that Avril Lavigne, man, that's what it was all about. Linkin Park, Blink-182, that's what all the rage was about in 2002. Not a single person cared about these dinosaur boy bands in 2002. I take it Pixar didn't get the memo that on January 1st, 2000, at exactly 12 a.m. midnight, all boy bands became extinct as nu metal and pop punk became the hot new thing. Yeah, that's what the real Y2K bug was. This movie would be infinitely more relatable if, instead of being about a teenage girl obsessed with a boy band, it's about a teenage boy obsessed with nu metal. The early 2000s setting and the whole I hate my mom thing that the movie has going for it really adds to this, and I think it's a huge missed opportunity. Like, I could just imagine the main character of this alternate version of the movie yelling at his mom and dad because they want him to do his homework, so he just goes into his room, slams the door, and starts listening to like Slipknot or something, you know, and then boom, the movie becomes infinitely more relatable to me. What the f***, Pixar? This was meant to be the Black Panther for early 2000s kids, and this is what we get? Seriously? After constantly getting oversaturated with 80s nostalgia and 90s nostalgia, us 2000s kids, we finally get to rise, and this is the representation we get? Bruh, for real? If this movie took place in the 80s instead of the early 2000s, I know for a fact that it would try to be as accurate as possible to the 80s. I know for a fact it would be filled to the brim with all kinds of pop culture references from the 80s. It would be like, hey, remember this thing from the 80s? Remember that thing from the 80s? Do you like Huey Lewis and the News? Their early work was a little too new wave for my taste, but when Sports came out in '83, I think they really came onto their own, commercially and artistically. Utterly unacceptable. You know, we all owe Cars 2 an apology. Cars 2 is not the worst Pixar movie. How do you make a movie that takes place in 2002 and you don't include a single reference to Linkin Park? Unacceptable. People are gonna ask if I'm being like 100% serious about this, or if I'm just joking around and doing a parody of the whole Mr. Enter thing, and all I'm gonna say is, it depends on how you interpret it, okay? That's all I'm gonna say. Wink wink. Although I am 100% joking and totally not being serious when I say that this movie would be better if the main characters were all fans of Limp Bizkit and not some boy band, I do genuinely think that this is just a really annoying, cringe movie that I just don't feel comfortable watching again. I'm just so grateful that GDT's Pinocchio won Best Animated Feature at the Oscars this year over this movie. I don't even care. As for Elemental, it looks alright, I guess. It's literally Zootopia, except with elements instead of animals. Like, it's almost the exact same thing as Zootopia. I absolutely love the concept behind this movie, which is why I feel bad that this will most likely be an average, perfectly fine movie with nothing special or notable about it. At the very least, I am hopeful that it'll be better than the two Pixar movies that came out last year. As is the case with most other modern Disney stuff, such as, you know, the MCU post-Endgame, it no longer feels like I want to watch these movies because I'm a fan of Pixar, but rather it feels like I watch these movies just for the sake of watching them, just so that I could say that I watch them. Some people could say that I've grown too old for these movies and that, they're not made for me anymore, and that's why I don't like them as much, but that is not the reason at all, because first of all, animation is for everyone and not just for kids, and anyone that believes it's only for kids is, in the nicest way possible, a complete f***ing idiot. Second of all, that cannot be the case, because I look at Pixar's Golden Age movies and I still enjoy them. I, a grown adult, still loves Ratatouille just as much as I did when I was a kid. In fact, I might actually love it even more. And it's not because of nostalgia either. Ratatouille is a genuinely beautiful movie. How the f*** did these people go from Ratatouille to Turning Red is a mystery to me. I still enjoy the Toy Story trilogy because they're still really great movies. Nostalgia plays a very small part in me still loving these movies. I'd also say as well that Pixar makes movies for everyone and not just for kids. I mean, yeah, again, animation is for everyone and not just for kids, but Pixar makes movies that anyone can enjoy. Anyone of any age could enjoy WALL-E. WALL-E is a great movie when you're a kid. It's a great movie when you're an adult. Anyone of any age can enjoy WALL-E. And chances are you'd be able to enjoy it more as an adult compared to when you were a kid. You'd find it's actually a much better film than you realize. Back then, Pixar was like no other animation studio. Nowadays, Pixar is no different from your average animation studio. They've become just another animation studio. That special magic, it's not there as much anymore. I mean, again, there are exceptions to this, like Inside Out and Coco, but they are very few and far between. And I know that Pixar is able to make an amazing movie again. I know that they are able to make something that's more than just good, and that's it. They're able to make something much better. Anyways, that's about it. I didn't want to make this video initially because I saw that a lot of other people have made videos similar to this one talking about how Pixar is not as good as it used to be, and I didn't want to deal with, claims that I'm plagiarizing these people or anything like that. And then eventually I decided, you know what, I made a video talking about how the MCU sucks post-Endgame, which God knows how many people have made videos about that, so I figured I might as well just make a video on Pixar as well. I might as well just continue this series of Disney bad videos. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing because that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I will see you all next time. Adios.